conference today. Finally got to hear from Billy himself. And look, we're going to go all about it and kind of what he talked about, what he had to say. His takeaways that I, noticed was excited for year 2. He kept referencing, we're really excited. I'm really excited to coach this team. He kind of said there's usually a team that you're excited to work with and coach. This is that team. High on Austin Armstrong, and we'll break that down a little bit. And then Steve and I are going to have a little debate on why Utah is so important. He has a disagreement on that, which is going to be exciting. But Dave, I'm going to go to you first. I want to get your tale of the tape of Billy Napier at his press conference.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of Billy. I would say Billy Napier's not going to win you over at a press conference because he pretty much almost kind of says the same things every little bit. But I got a little bit of a takeaway from some of the things that he said. I mean, when he was, everybody's wondering about the offensive coordinator, that whole rumors going around and all that.
Sure.
And, he said it's something we'll continue to evaluate. I like. Oh, excuse me, I typed that out wrong. I like to have my hands on the scripts and play calls. Says he'll continue to do it and we'll continue to evaluate that. That was a little bit of a takeaway I got from that. So he's not necessarily saying that he wants to handle all the play calls here in the future, but the question's not out of the book of him hiring an offensive coordinator. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then at the same time, he talks about the quarterback competition, with Graham Mertz and Jack Miller and Max Brown. And he kind of alludes to Max Brown a little bit instead of Jack Miller.
Hold on that. We'll get to Max here in just a minute. Yeah. I don't want to go ahead. Go ahead though.
Yeah, I mean, and then obviously, with the new facility, he talked about the players, being more, efficient and spending more time with each other. Of course, we want that player collaboration. We didn't really have that under Dan Mullen, and it kind of it spiraled into something else. And you hear it from a lot of the players when we interview them, how it's just so much better. It's like night and day. A lot of them are getting to know each other a lot more. So you always want that team collaboration. That really helps there on the football field too, especially when you're trying to, figure out plays and defensive plays. And, we saw the defense for the past 2 or 3 years. They couldn't figure out what plays were going on. Trey Dean's running around like a 4.75 lost puppy, didn't, not knowing where to go. So hopefully that collaboration, between the defensive guys and the team, that's fixed there. And you just kind of, he talks about the transition to the Sun Belt to the SEC. He's answered this questions quite a bit. But he talks about the recruiting process, work process, evaluation process, and they'll, adjust as the years go on. And, you have to in the SEC, man. I mean, everything changes in the SEC. I mean, we've seen Nick Saban go from the, ground and pound and the pro style quarterback. Now he's spreading it out a little bit more, getting some of these dual threat guys. And it's more offensive now than it used to be. Because, I mean, when you went to the SEC, you thought about defense. Now you're thinking about offense when you go to the SEC. And, of course, Kirby probably is still the king of the defense because he was a good defensive coordinator at Alabama, still has an elite defense over there at Georgia. But mostly it's more of an offensive ran conference now than it used to be now. So that's kind of a little bit of the takeaways I got from him. Of course, he gave a shout out to Florida Victorious and how much it's changed in the leadership and just how much they have benefited from the opportunities and the organization and the integrity of the obviously the employees that work there. And it was just really, you kind of got like a little bit more of a refreshing kind of feel from Billy Napier, especially SEC media days. And it makes it kind of excited for year 2, kind of excited for Utah. So that's kind of my takeaways that I got from basically just from the whole, the press conference from myself.
Excited was a big one, but something you said about efficiency, and I loved that he mentioned that too. Look, in a way, Billy's a little bit of a nerd in a good way. This is something that we get talked about all the time. The nerds are talking, and somebody kind of talked about how consistent he is and how he's deliberate in his process and how organized he is and how it takes time for that to get established. And efficiency, it's such a small, minute thing, but it does add up. And he mentioned that as now that they're in the new facility, it takes 10 minutes to go from talking to practice versus before it took 35 minutes. And you're like, who cares? It adds up. It's just an extra 20 minutes each day that you can spend more time on one-on-one or doing an extra practice route, which by the end of summer, by the end of the spring, it's a lot of minutes that you just got back. So that's huge. Another big thing that, speaking to the offensive coordinator position, obviously, we had a big question marks last year on him calling the plays. He's trying to do too much, and I think I agree with that. He mentioned this year, too. He's like, I feel like my list of to-do list is much shorter than it was last year. I have been preaching that and hitting that horn since this since February, especially how the recruiting has been ran, so how Friday Night Lights went, how the barbecue went, everything seems to be moved up. And it seems like he's more in control of where things are headed versus trying to play catch up like he was before. And with all that being said, I think that's going to translate to him having more success calling plays because he's not having to do a million things and playing behind the eight ball. So, you know what? I'm okay with letting him run the plays. I don't think we can go off 1 year and just go, hey, what happened here? You know what I mean? The next thing I want to go off.
Hold on. I see people in the chat saying Rob Sales, the OC. Well, Billy Napier calls the plays. So that's why I said that.
Yeah, look, I think there was times last year where we were wondering who was calling the plays at certain times. I think during Florida State, I think Rob Sell was calling a few of the plays, and we were kind of kicking ass and taking names. But that's just what we were looking from the outside in.
There's another. He had a few plays in his back pocket, a few plays that they didn't use versus Vanderbilt the week before. I think they were a little bit reserved. I think
for sure.
I think the Rob Sale had a few plays in his back pocket that he was like, "God, I think we should run this." And they're like, no, hold on to that for next week. Hold on to that for next week.
Lose this game.
He goes, no. But I think we should run it now. Like we should run it now.
So he spoke about Austin.
I was going to say, there's another quote that I wanted to read that I did take away from this, that I saved it. He says, we're not going to allow outside opinion or created narrative to define the reality of the 2023 team. The games are coming. In the meantime, this group will work as it's continued to work. And that's what I like, dude. Billy Napier's not fazed by anything. He does not care what anybody says. Doesn't care if they rank us last. Doesn't care if Lane Kiffin makes a tweet. Doesn't care about any of that kind of stuff, dude. That dude is like laser focused in on his program. I would say that is probably like the best quality I love about Billy Napier.
Yes,
is he's just not fazed by anything. He does not care whatsoever.
And look, compared to last year to this year, I thought he was cool as a cucumber last year. It feels even cooler this year. Like he's just comfortable in his own skin. And they even mentioned it on the press, or when they were talking to him, like you just look more excited and in tune this year than you were in the past. And he quoted the GOAT, Steve Spurrier, was his talking season. And I love that he said that because he hears it. Who doesn't hear it? Everybody's hearing it. The only person that doesn't have to really listen to the noise is Georgia. The noise for Georgia is created noise to trying to just take down the defending champion, which is very easy to defend. But when you've had multiple struggling seasons, it's a lot harder to not ignore the noise, right?
Yeah.
We'll see how that plays out. But Austin Armstrong, this is a big thought here. They asked about Austin. They go, hey, what's your, talk to us about that hire and what makes you so excited. And he talked about his process and the things he's been able to do and how he coached with him at Southern Miss for a little bit. Kirby coached him up for a little bit. Obviously, Bama had him until we plucked him to be our defensive coordinator. I think he was going to Bama to be a linebacker coach. But he said it took me 15 minutes to pick Austin Armstrong. And now that we're into July, going into the end of July, it honestly feels like Austin's been there the entire time. You know what I mean? It's like a good friend. Somebody that you've had for a very long time, they just kind of fit right in. It's like, man, I feel like I've known you forever. That's what Austin Armstrong feels like. And I got to thinking, we've talked about this before, how Saban pushes his coaches out. He won't fire anybody. He's kind of your class act dude where he's like, look, you're going to go elsewhere. Go find somewhere. I'm not getting rid of you, but go find a job so it doesn't look bad on you. Got me thinking, was Patrick Toney more of like, hey, I would start putting some feelers out there before, because I think this relationship, it's going to have to move on, and I've got my eye on somebody. I'm not saying that's what happened, but I wouldn't see Bill. I don't think Billy would ever fire anybody. I think we might see we'll know, I think with a couple years being underneath Billy Napier, if we see kind of coaches go in and out like that, we'll get a pretty good understanding of like, yeah, that was a push out, not a leave. We'll see. That's just my thought after kind of hearing him talk about Austin Armstrong and how only took it 15 minutes. It's like, I know you know the guy, but that's a pretty big hire to only take 15 minutes. And obviously he's just talking, but, and then what was the last graphic that go ahead?
I was going to say, just with Patrick Toney and all that, I know that those weren't originally like defensive guys that he recruited, but man, that defense was worse than Todd Grantham, man. Like it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
There was like no pressure. And I think he was a very analytic guy, but I think he just got too analytic with it. And just, you're seeing a lot more aggression with Austin Armstrong. And that's what I like. And even if the defense isn't just lights out and top 25, or can you at least get into the 80s or the 70s? That would be a vast improvement from having, 13 stats rated in the hundreds.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the expectations because that's a big point of emphasis of where we ranked on defense. But the last thing was Utah. Brian Kelly talked about it, and Steve and I are going to bicker here for just a minute. Utah is why I love having Utah first. And Brian Kelly mentioned it as well, too, about having Florida State as their first game, is that it allows for your team to be focused these past 3 months, June, July, August. Because that game one, there's a lot of pressure. It's going to be an exciting game. It's a bowl game feeling-esque. So
that's a good way to put it.
It keeps you dialed in versus you're playing a Ball State or McNeese State week one. It's very easy to stroll into that as it's a preseason game. I don't need to be as dialed in. I've got an argument for you because I know what you're going to say.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead and say it before I argue back?
How are you going to argue back if I don't say it? Go ahead and say your argument.
Well, no, because I want you to say your point so I can defend it. Because your point, okay. Go ahead. Your point is that you think it's good to have a
so last year going into the LSU game,
yes,
FSU had already played one game. I want to get against a team I can't even pronounce their name.
Dukins, yeah,
something like that, right? But they had an opportunity to get their offense on the field, their defense on the field. They had an opportunity to call plays on the field, run package changes, run audibles, run an offense against a team that you know that you are going to beat. So you had the ability to just get out there and not against your own team anymore. You're not in pads or thuds or just, hitting and no tackling. You're running against a actual football team. FSU played a full football game prior to the LSU game. And I believe, especially going into the Superdome in Louisiana against LSU, that had a huge difference and a huge benefit for FSU to be able to put those things together to see where are we missing?
Sure.
What are we not doing right? What are we not communicating effectively? What packages are we not exchanging? Did we get a personnel package right or wrong, or did we get our defensive line set? Did we get our punt block team set, or heaven forbid in that game our field goal block set right? Did we get those things right in that game? And I think that was a massive advantage for FSU, especially from last year going in, because nobody really understood what type of step FSU was going to take. That game, I believe, gave them the ability to understand that they knew where they needed to fix some things, and I think what they knew they were doing very well, and what they could continue to focus on against LSU.
Yeah, the defense of that, I think for FSU, because of where you were, it made sense to have that game. For LSU and for Florida in their second year, to lock things in, I think it's more beneficial to have a big game like that to keep their eye on the prize and to get everybody dialed in more so, because, again, it's very easy to fall on your feet and to get lackadaisical. With a team that's more established, I believe having that pickup game, that preseason game, could be more beneficial. You could argue this so you're blue in the face on either way, but I think for where Billy is and where they're at in their cycle, in their process, having that Utah game week one is huge. Another big thing about Billy is he mentioned at his press conference when he coached at Arizona State, he's played at Utah or coached at Utah, which I think that's huge. I mean, being able to understand what it's like to be in that atmosphere, obviously that was an advantage to us last year coming to the Swamp. Being able to, he has an understanding of what to expect when you go there. That excites me a little bit. Now, the players don't. They have no clue what that altitude's going to do to them. But, look, I think he'll have an idea of preparation a little bit better than, let's say, the Utah coach had prepping them for the humidity down here, the atmosphere, etc. There is a little bit that kind of soothed me of, like, look, he's run these roads before. So,
yeah, I could see both sides. And, look, I mean, for Florida, going to an away, it's going to be hostile. It's going to be hostile. It's going to be a different environment.
I hope so.
And I don't mean a different environment like it's going to be like maybe a stadium they haven't played in before. I think it's going to be a weather that they haven't played in before. And I think people don't really quite understand the difference between 100%
it's the
humidity.
same thing we pressed last year about the humidity
about
thing,
them
where
coming
Utah
down
was like
here.
joking. I was like, no, it's serious.
No, trust me.
I think it's the same going up 100%. I'm not sleeping on it by any stretch. It's going to be something. It's going to be a.
But with a new quarterback, I mean, isn't Florida going through kind of what FSU was going through last year? I mean, look, we had Jordan Travis, and he had been in our system for a while. but we still didn't see the quarterback of Jordan Travis that we saw this year. So we didn't really know what we had, right? So I don't know, man. I feel like if I'm Florida, I would love a Duquesne in week 0
sure,
to go, but to refine things and see what my quarterback and what
I wouldn't hate an easy game. Don't get it twisted. I wouldn't hate it, but okay. I like it though. I like it. Good stuff there. Go ahead, Dave.
Let's say, I guess it's like a double-edged sword. Like if you get that cupcake game before the big game, you can kind of work out the kinks, but at the same time, like you've got something on film for the next week, so the other team can study that. But at the same time, you don't want, if you're playing somebody that's like a cupcake, you're not going to give away your whole playbook anyway, because you could probably easily beat them on the field. So it is kind of,
unless they're Vandy.
I was going to say, we talked about this to start the cast. Unless you're Vandy and you don't want to give away too many plays, and you keep too much in the back pocket, right?
Well, also we're not going to have a quarterback that throws it like 20 million feet into the stands as a Hail Mary either. So
that is very much true.